Hey guys, welcome to Ryan's Running Reviews. Today is the highly anticipated comparison between the New Balance Morev4 and the New Balance Morev4. Let's run with it. Before we get started, I do want to mention that these shoes were provided to me by Roadrunner Sports. However, didn't have a chance to preview this video, and this file synopsis is my own. I'd also like to say please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. The More line is one of New Balance's thickest, more traditional daily training shoes. They also came out with the SuperComp trainer, which has the illegal stack height, the FuelCell foam, and a carbon fiber plate, and that's kind of its own special category. But as far as like more classical, more traditional, more familiar daily trainers, this is one of New Balance's thickest options. The Morev4 costs $150 this year and comes down almost a half ounce in weight. It goes from 10.8 ounces now down to 10.4. So we're moving in the right direction for such a large shoe. And even though we went up in weight, we did gain an extra millimeter of stack height. We now have 34 millimeters in the heel with that same 4 millimeter drop, bringing us to 30 millimeters in the forefoot. The upper, as you would probably guess, has been redesigned this year, with the biggest difference between the 3 and the 4 being the midfoot section. On the V3, it's a relatively consistent engineered mesh. There's not much structure here. You do get a couple plastic overlays and maybe a couple design elements, but for the most part, it's relatively just one layer of engineered mesh that kind of goes all the way through. However, that's not the case with the V4. This year, they gave us a little bit more structure to the midfoot by adding some synthetic or plastic overlays and then fusing it directly to the engineered mesh upper. This makes the upper in the midfoot section much more stiff on both the lateral and the medial side, where on the previous version, it was just a thin piece of engineered mesh, which is a little bit more floppy. So you get a little bit more of a well-contained midfoot lockdown. It's a very smooth feeling synthetic material. I personally liked it. However, because it is this very close-knit synthetic plastic-like material, the breathability through the midfoot has gone down a bit. And if we move to the toe box, this is where all the breathability takes place because it's just purely engineered mesh. There's no overlays or anything like that. Again, that's just in the midfoot. And I thought it worked well. Comparing it to last year, it's slightly thinner, slightly more breathable, and it has a smoother feel on the inside. So not a massive change, it's just a little bit more pared down compared to the previous version. As far as the heel counter goes, the padding is about the same as the V3. I think they shrunk the elf ear pull tab just a bit, a little bit less of a heel counter, which is probably where some of the weight savings is coming from. But the padding and comfort I thought were roughly the same. Heel counter is very well built. The tongue is still non-gusseted. I wish they would change that. However, the big update here is they definitely brought it back to a more minimal setup. Last year was this massive, thick monstrosity that hindered the breathability and was just a little bit cumbersome. And this year it's definitely on the more minimal side of things. I would say it's a little bit below average with regard to like padding and whatnot. No, I think this works well. I'm quite happy with it. It fits with the overall more streamlined approach to the upper, and I'm quite happy that it doesn't get super intrusive. It's not super tall or anything like that. It does a decent job of keeping the lace pressure off, and I thought was fairly comfortable. So overall, I really do like the updates here. It is a very seamless, consistent feel, even though you do have that kind of internal synthetic midfoot cage. I thought the lockdown fit, everything like that was quite nice. The biggest difference you notice is the tongue, which was my biggest gripe here with the previous version. So it's a much more streamlined, much more minimalized approach with a similar level of comfort. I don't think it deviates that much. It just makes some minor tweaks. So if you were happy with the previous version and you were just hoping for a less cumbersome tongue and a little bit more security through the midfoot, I think that's what the Morev4 delivers. The midsole is still Fresh Foam X. However, according to New Balance, this is their highest stack height and softest version ever of Fresh Foam X. So it is a slightly different experience compared to the previous Fresh Foam X. It's kind of hard to keep track of it all. I wish they maybe add a number or something so we could tell which version it is, but it is an updated, slightly softer version compared to the V3. We also have more volume to the midsole this year with an extra millimeter and different sculpting as well, which makes a big difference as we now have large foam sidewalls on the lateral side and the medial side. Or if you look on the previous version, you did get a little bit of sidewall towards the back of the heel section, kind of as like a guide rail or a guidance system, but there was really nothing towards the midfoot. Now, I didn't find the V3 to be unstable or have that be an issue for me, but I will say after trying the V4, it's a much more stable experience, mainly because you feel locked into this platform with these large side walls. The other big change to the midsole as far as the design goes is the back of the shoe. So if you look here, you'll see this large kind of carved out section of the heel area where it's just a solid block of foam on the V3. Now what this does is it allows your foot to sink further in and then kind of pop out, giving you a mini trampoline effect. It also allows the heel to kind of splay out, providing some stability. We saw this on the SuperComp trainer. However, that has the FuelCell foam and that carbon fiber plate. So similar technique, just incorporated here into the Morev4. As far as the ground contact or surface area goes, or the width of the heel and the forefoot, it's about the same. This is a 12.5, this is a 13, but just doing the eyeball test, I would say it's roughly the same. Maybe the V4 has slightly more surface area on the outsole, however, they're pretty darn comparable. So overall, the V4 definitely provides a different experience compared to its predecessor, with the primary reason being the back half of the shoe. One, the foam is softer, and then two, they took a chunk of foam out of the heel area, which means your heel is going to sink in a little bit more compared to the V3. Now, why does this matter? Well, this is a 4mm drop shoe, which means your heel is only 4mm higher than your forefoot. So with that extra sink in the heel, you're going to have a more flat experience. This really depends on your personal running style. Personally, I kind of liked having the extra amount of foam under the heel and having a more noticeable rocker sensation, just because your heel won't sink in as much. You're able to get into that rocker motion a little bit easier. I think this primarily affects midfoot to heel strikers. The other thing I'll say is if you use this shoe for walking, you will notice that heel sensation quite a bit. Because fresh foam is so soft, I found my heel sinking in between these two columns quite a bit. I had a little bit of discomfort until I got used to it. Personally, I do prefer, like I said before, the more filled in heel area. Fresh foam is more geared towards that soft plush feeling rather than like a ton of energy return. That's what the FuelCell line is for, and I think that's why it works really well for the SuperComp trainer. But for here, for running, and then even more for walking, it didn't work optimally for me. Other people might have a different experience, but I do prefer having that filled in heel. So with all that being said, the V4 definitely provides a slightly softer experience on a much more stable platform, mainly because of these foam walls that we talked about. If you look on the one for the medial side, you'll see you just get a lot more foam right in the middle of your foot. This really does feel noticeable. If you kind of do the 1 foot test and kind of lean side to side, you just feel much more stable in this platform, which I think is important because it does bring a slightly softer ride. Moving on to the outsole, the design has changed. However, the V4 still has a ridiculous amount of rubber. I would actually probably want them to pare it back a little bit more just to reduce the weight of the shoe. I don't know if you need this much, but it does work well. Grip was fine. And like we talked about before, the biggest change is the heel section with that kind of carve out towards the back. But overall, grip worked well, and you just still have a ridiculous amount of rubber. So to summarize everything, I'm really happy with the upper updates. It's a more minimal approach. I do like having more structure through the midfoot, although it does decrease breathability just a bit. The tongue is a great update, more minimal. I do wish they would gusset it, but it's not the monstrosity kind of bulky clunky thing we saw on the previous version. And with regard to the ride, if you're a forefoot striker, this is basically going to be a softer V3 experience with more stability because of those large foam sidewalls. However, if you're a midfoot to heel striker, you will notice that heel sensation with the carved out chunk of foam at the back of the shoe. For me personally, I like having that chunk of foam. It really comes down to what you like and how you particularly run. So I think it works well on like the SuperComp trainer with the FuelCell foam, because FuelCell is meant to be super bouncy and have a little bit more energy return to it, while Fresh Foam X is more focused on being plush and comfortable and soft. So at the end of the day, I think the V4 makes some great updates with the upper. You have a different sensation with the heel that provides a very soft ride. It works well as an Ultra Max cushion daily trainer. It really just depends if that heel update is what you like.